Guess I don't have a way to see the slides myself because I've set it up this way. So I had a whole talk written out on how I'll do an analysis of how we fail between releases. And then Shyam and Vijay just covered all of it yesterday morning and afternoon. So I had to redo this talk significantly this morning and change what I'm talking about. It's still about how we fail, but with a different focus. I'm going to look at how we fail for different groups of people that we're responsible for. My name is Nigel. I work on Gluster CI. Very significantly, I am not a Gluster developer. So some of these are my interpretations of what goes on. If I'm wrong, find me and shout at me. Don't heckle me on stage. So the first set is how do we fail our users? And how many people in the room actually run their own Gluster cluster? Can I have a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 5. OK, we have about 10 groups of users. So this is a synthesis of a couple of things that we fail at. We do release bugs occasionally. Sometimes we catch them the first day after the release. Sometimes we catch them the second day after the release. We're getting better at it. But the essential problem that every time we do this, we fail our users. It is unavoidable in some circumstances, but it is something that we need to think about on a daily basis as we go about our work, that we do fail our users if we drop these sort of bugs in production. The other thing is our documentation. This has always been a problem for me. When I was interviewing with Red Hat, I tried to set up Gluster, and the documentation didn't work. I didn't get a working cluster. And we've fixed that now, but imagine the number of people who are evaluating Gluster in that time period and who just discovered that they can't get Gluster working. It's either now you've lost confidence in the product or you've lost confidence in the developers. And that is a failure to our users by us. And this one is, it looks like I'm pointing at Niels and Caleb, but I'm really not, is that when we announce a release, we often don't have a way for people to download it because we're pushing it to a particular OS system and there's a review process for that, or it is pushed to the CentOS SIG, but none of us have volunteered to test it, so it's not ready to be released to users. And there's a whole bunch of failures that happen because of that. And if I'm a user, I'm just going to be disappointed. The Gluster developers released something that fixes problems for me, but I can't use it. And that is an utter failure to our users. Yes, there are problems on how we do it. It is a thing that we have to think about. But at the end of the day, as a user, you're just going to be annoyed at Gluster for not getting it to the users. And the last one is telling our users they're plain wrong. This came from a conversation at Open Source Summit this week. There was a user who told us, I think on the mailing list, that they're getting a particular output. And we just told them, you shouldn't be seeing that output. Straight up. They just walked away pissed off at us. That's not exactly the best user experience we can give them. And this list goes on. And there's a lot of things that we do, and this is the short version of a bunch of things we do at failing users. And as we work on this project, something that we should think about on a daily basis is how does this affect our users? When we do a cost versus benefit of, I am shipping this feature at a half done state, it's a question of how does it affect the users versus how does it affect my work? How do we fail at developers? So the last slide was pointing fingers at everyone. This one's mostly pointing fingers at me. So our tests take, so when I started, our test took about 3.5 hours. And now it takes about, I think, a little over 5 hours. Because I remember putting in like a timeout of 360 minutes. And I put a timeout of 300 minutes, and we hit that. So I had to stretch the timeout to 360 now. And Amar had recently done this thing where he took out the longest taking tests. And I think there's about 15 tests. Just those 15 tests take nearly 2 hours. So it takes about 6,000 minutes, no, 6,000 seconds. which is a little less than 2 hours. Just those 10 to 15 tests. And it is worth going back to look at these tests and checking if those tests are worth it in terms of, do we need those tests? And also checking if those tests actually need to take so much time. If they do, that's a different question. And the other thing is, I've had a chat with the Facebook guys. They run their tests in 15 minutes, which is basically, let's throw a bunch of hardware at the tests, which we can't do perfectly, but we've just decided that we're going to run with it. For the longest time, I was looking at checking if we can run it in Docker, in parallel, and I think I've just accepted the fact that nobody runs tests on their machines, and I have to just live with that, and have to provide a system where it's not a pain to run the tests so that patches get pushed sooner. And I've realized that if the tests don't run fast, the cycle of development just completely changes. It's, let me push a patch before I go home so that when I come back to work tomorrow, I have the test results, and then somebody can review it. Versus, let me just push the patch up and ping somebody for review. It'll be done in about 45 minutes, and the cycle's just closed. Especially close to a release, we just have like, that's the time when I see the CI system stressed out, and that's when I'm looking at Jenkins very closely. Because if one test fails, I'll have people asking me, is there something wrong with Jenkins? Because my review had CentOS failed twice, thrice. Something's wrong with it. One of the things we've done here, we've just removed NetBSD. It's no longer a blocking test. Does anybody actually use Gluster in production on NetBSD? I've been asking this question since I started, and I have never got a good answer to this. So that's one. So we've talked about Gluster for a while, and when it fails, this is my fault, is that there is no easy way to someone to go in and debug the failure. I can provide you logs, but I can't provide you with access to the machine because of how the infrastructure is set up. And we are going to fix this, but as it stands right now, I'm sort of blocking you guys from helping us writing new tests because I have no way for you to debug the test in its failed state. Like, you can't just go in and run a volume command or a status command or a state dump. I don't have the facility to do that yet. And the last one is a bit iffy. This is the one where I think somebody might find me to whack me, is that our planning cycles are quite tight, especially upstream, because what happens is we start off with like 10 things we want in a release, and then as we get closer, it becomes 8, and then we go closer, and it becomes 6, and then it becomes, the 6 will land, and we may have 5 landing after the feature, after, what is it called? Do we call it feature freeze? After branch up, yes, thank you. And a lot of this has to do with, we don't have a lot of slack in how we plan, and we have conversations about coverty, we have conversations about improving memory leaks. If you've got so much work planned out that it's going to take all of your time to just do the features that are supposed to land or fix the bugs, how do you find time to fix none of these things? Things like coverty, which are not exactly features, which are not per se bugs unless it is causing something in production. It's sort of somewhere in between where it's nice to fix if you have the adequate amount of time, but our planning cycles are too tight to actually have the adequate amount of time. And this is what happens. And the last bit is how we fail our community. This is about not just users or developers. This is about people who do not work on Gluster on a full-time basis, people who use Gluster as well. So a lot of this is how we grow our community. I mean, as it stands right now, there's a lot of contribution from Red Hat. There's some contribution from Facebook. And we are not equipped to deal with anything more than that very well. We have the systems in place, but do we have the controls in place so that we actually go and help people out? If you see that somebody is a first-time contributor, do we actually deal with them in a more friendly manner? Or do we just say, this doesn't have tests that work, so we're just going to give you a -1? Because that's a very different approach to how, say, somebody on GitHub deals with it. So GitHub has this thing where it says first-time contributor. And then you know that this person is new, and you have to be a bit friendly to them. You should be friendly with everyone, but a little more friendly. And when a patch is contributed by a non-contributor, it is very much recommended that you have a conversation with them about, if they don't know what they're doing and they're doing a completely different approach, most people would like you to help them get to the right point, but it's work that we have to do. It's work, we have to go review it, we have to be a little patient with the person. They may have another job to do in their day job, so they're not going to get back to us in 24 hours like everybody else. And it's an ongoing learning process that we have to do. There is a separate conversation about rewarding people who contribute to the project. Amar and I were in conversations at the Open Source Summit, where they were talking about metrics and how to look at the growth of a project was in terms of how many people join the project who are completely new every year, or how many people who are not the big organizations who contribute to the project join in. So for instance, how many people contribute to Gluster who do not work at Facebook or Red Hat, and does that number grow? How do we make that number grow? And if we see a lot of support questions on a particular subject that currently doesn't really, that does feedback into docs at some point, but it isn't a process. It's more of somebody out of the goodwill doing it occasionally. It's not I've seen this come up plenty of times. Let me file a bug for it, so we have a note to write the documentation and put it into a flow. There is a completely different documentation talk that needs to happen, which has happened several times, about how there isn't a flow in a documentation. All of that is a problem. But this is a particular bit where we fail our community. And where is Amy? This is what happens when we fail a community. You have the community manager coming at you. So, yeah. I took the picture. This is a couple of commitments that we had last year at the Gluster Summit. It's sort of tracking, we've made a couple of commitments at the Gluster Summit, and do we actually follow through them over the course of, by the next summit? Oops. Damn it. So some of the items were performance testing, writing tests with Gluster, and fixing static analysis. And I accidentally pushed the button, so you all know we actually did not follow through with all of them. It's not at a state where I can say, we promised this, and we actually did it. I can clearly say that we haven't actually done it, but it's more of we've done a bit of it, but not at the state where we want to be. So performance testing is sort of in this place where there's a repo now. It has code. It has performance engineers contributing to it. But is it in a state where somebody can use it right now? Not really. Do we have actual numbers that you can use? Not really. But it's getting there. It's moving in the right direction. And that's the same with writing tests with Gluster. Is I can say that today we have more tests in Gluster than we did this time last year. But I can also say with good confidence that none of them were written by developers. So moving, but not in the right moving in the right direction, but not exactly there. And static analysis is, actually, let me switch out to this. I'm just going to show the graph of coverty over time, if I can manage to get it on the screen. Right. Oh. Oops, that's the top of the page. Right. So that's That's the red line is the one that we should be tracking. That's the open number of covert issues over time, and that's the fixed. And if you look at the number of issues fixed, it's actually going up. And the number of outstanding issues are kind of dropping, but also going up. And there is some progress, but there is a lot of progress to be made, because we have, as of now, 1,592 defects. All of them are not critical, but there's a good number of issues that need to be fixed. And it's more of an ongoing process than a setup where, oh, you sit for a week, do nothing, and fix covert issues. That's not how we're going to fix it, because then we'll just have those issues pop up again. It's more of, in the next release, I want to drop these numbers by 100 or 50. I'd even take 10. So my point with this slide is we do have a lot of problems, and every time we have a conversation about this, we agree that we need to fix it. And we don't actually track whether we're fixing it. That's one side of it. And we don't actually write down, we had a goal of this, and this is how far we got, which is good, or we had a goal of this, and we did nothing to that extent. And unless we have that, we are never going to get better at it. If we drop the covert errors from about 800 now, that is on the page that Caleb publishes, to 700, I'd be happy. It was 900 this time last year, and we were at 815, I think. And it's a matter of spending maybe 1 day a month working on them and dropping the numbers. And if I take all of the issues that I mentioned, a lot of it isn't that you have to sit down and delete everything we have and start from scratch. For example, the documentation isn't a matter of, let's delete everything and write everything from new. It's a matter of, which are the things that are really, really bad right now, which hurts us and which needs to be fixed. So this talk isn't meant to say, we suck. We do, but that's a different story. Sorry, Amy. It's about having the conversation about how do we get better. It's about starting that conversation. I mean, if you want to have specific conversations, come find me at a BOF, or start a BOF for it, and I will join you. There's definitely one that Jonathan and Shweta are leading for tests, and we had one yesterday for docs. We want to tie our releases with a gate for covert errors and a bunch of other static analysis things. We want to have ASAN builds, There are things that we want to have, and we need to have a conversation about when we have them and what does the ideal thing look like, and move towards that goal. That's my talk.
Yes, there was a question back there.
So hi, I'm a user persona, so I do have a suggestion for the how we suck our user part. Try to start to become your own user. So set up a cluster and put your sensitive stuff on it, so that you feel the pain if you update the stuff you just wrote. You know what I mean? So it has to be some sensitive and really important stuff on that, not any testing data or something like that.
We briefly thought of putting downloads.gluster.org on, well, Gluster. And given that we want to mirror it across multiple data centers, that at that point did not make sense. But this is something that Michael, who's sitting behind you, and is a sysadmin for Gluster, has been pushing to do, itching to do rather, and we might actually do it. Cool.
I'll just point out what I probably shouldn't say, but about 20% of Red Hat's internal storage inside of IT is using Gluster. So we do put real stuff on it internally.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, well, just, I mean, to make a snide remark, maybe we shouldn't put our downloads on Gluster because we don't want to make our users suffer if something's bad. But I mean, a few other comments. So you mentioned initially the releases. We should have the CentOS builds and something like that. that confuses me a little because I think that's actually separate. So this is, one is the upstream software, we should provide tarballs, and then distributions can provide builds. I mean, it couldn't be seen as a coincidence that we have a few CentOS people who can, in a timely manner, provide these builds. But I think it shouldn't be a requirement because it's actually separate.
So I'm a sysadmin at the end of the day, and you'd be really hard-pressed to find a company which just installs something from a tarball. Even from an RPM that's from the internet, it's hard, but a SIG is as close as you can get to from CentOS. It's not really that, but close.
Okay, let me put it a little more positively. I think with the way we're doing, integrating our releases with CentOS storage SIG builds, we are actually doing a lot better than many other software projects are doing.
Yes.
Okay, so, and
that was me pointing out how most of the builds are managed by 2 people who sit to either side of you. And
I might point out, building packages is not anywhere in either Neil's or my job description.
Yes,
so.
I agree.
This brings me to my other comment, because if you say, hey, we committed last time at the summit, right? There is always this problem of people working on Gluster for their work, and then if the upstream community commits to something, it's always like, to a good extent, it's on your spare time and stuff, so it's always extremely difficult for an upstream project to make real commitments. Like, we want to clean up those like static things, static analysis bugs.
I agree. This is, I'm talking at a project level. I'm not talking at an internal level. I'm speaking about it as a community member who happens to work on Gluster, saying, as the rest of the community who work on Gluster, we should set goals, not as I work on Gluster at Red Hat. It's a very hard distinction, yes.
It's hard, so as an upstream community without taking into account...
That was my point, is that if you're making a commitment, it is, missing it is fine as long as you're moving in the right direction.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And to speak a little bit to the comment about CentOS and the SIGs, that actually has been our biggest feedback out of our last release, is improving that particular cycle. So, I mean, yes, we're doing very well in terms of being able to get our releases more on time and more, people understand when they're going to happen, but that seems to be one of our big pain points for our users. So.
And again, I'm looking at this exactly not from a point of somebody who knows what happens in the Gluster community. I'm looking at it from the point of view of somebody who wants to consume Gluster. Yeah,
we like users.
We have our own politics on why it goes wrong. We know why it goes wrong, but they don't.
So, having come relatively recently from a different company, I'll tell you that having a lot of coverity errors and things like that is not particularly uncommon. As well, striving for 0 is probably not something that one should lose sleep over.
Yeah, I know.
However, things related to code quality are certainly important, and to the extent that one can put in automated enforcement, that works pretty well in practice. So, for instance, and I don't know, maybe there is something in the process today that I just, I haven't heard about, but the process that I am familiar with has basically ratchets. So whenever you commit something, and the analysis gets run, if you have fixed one or more analysis problems, the threshold now gets lowered to the current state. And if you commit something that increases the number of errors, your commit gets rejected. And you have to, if you introduce something, you basically have to fix something, either that or somewhere else. And the number must keep coming down for each commit, or at least be no worse. As well, this works for things like very common data structures that you don't want the size to creep up over time.
Right.
And so, potentially that's an idea. Right.
It's something we've talked about. The problem when the last time I looked at it is that there's no easy way to mark false positives, and that's where I got a little lost. So if you know how to do it, we can have a conversation about this.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Well, another issue we have related to coverability is that we do the test every day, and I do not know how long it takes, but we cannot do that on every commit. I don't know its setup. It's just magic. We get an email to say you have a ton of error. Yeah, we cannot really test everything that people are doing to see if it increases the number or not. It would be nice, but we cannot.
For the record, I just picked coverability because that's something I could attach a number to, not something I specifically think we should absolutely fix. But that's the thing I could measure very easily. I can't hear you guys.
I'll come back.
I was going to say, I think you guys should really focus on getting the time for testing down. The reason I say that is because when we also had this problem. We were taking 6-10 hours to run the whole test suite, and as a result, we just didn't run the test suite. We're actually now, what we're doing is we're running the test suite, and we're running the test suite with ASAN on every commit. And because we can do it in 5 to 15 minutes, you can, if you want to scale that down, you can take it to 30 minutes. That will actually help your build quality quite a bit. So like, I think getting your test time down first is like very, very key.
Yeah, that's why we had the chat, and I'm going to go back and fix that. Is that all?
Just a quick comment about that dog fooding where it matters. I don't want to be too aggressive, but you guys really should be doing that. Like, if there's something that you're nervous around Gluster on, please put that on Gluster, because that's what companies like us do, and we risk our infrastructure and some of us, you know, our reputation at the company by putting stuff on Gluster. We do it, so you guys should do it.
Okay. I think that's lunch.
All right. I will leave the Birds of a Feather session board open through lunch, because you probably have some things you now want to talk about. And we will reconvene